your student loans are about to look completely different.
Yeah, they really are.
Congress just passed the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, or the OBBBA.
Right, the OBBBA.
And this legislation, it drives $4 trillion in tax cuts across the economy.
Right.
But it also triggers the absolute biggest student loan shakeup we have seen in decades.
Decades. Easily.
Starting July 1st, 2026, the government slashes borrowing limits across the board. Like, totally cuts them down.
And they're killing off the most popular repayment plans, too.
Exactly. Plus, it hands control of 9.2 million defaulted loans straight over to the collection powers of the U.S. Treasury.
Which is a massive shift.
It is. And meanwhile, there's this fierce debate exploding over a brand new rule. It actually strips loan forgiveness away from public servants if their employers support illegal immigration or perform specific medical procedures on minors.
It's basically a total rewrite of the American higher education system.
It really is.
Yeah.
So welcome to today's deep dive. Our mission today is to unpack the hard facts of the OBBBA for you. We're going to break down exactly how much money you can actually borrow now.
And we'll explore this hidden tax bomb that's just waiting for millions of borrowers.
Right. And finally, we'll decode those super controversial new rules for public service forgiveness. So let's just jump right in.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
So let's start with those hard limits on borrowing, because this changes the immediate financial math for, well, anyone stepping foot on a college campus.
Oh, absolutely. The scale of this really can't be overstated.
Because under the old system, the federal government essentially offered a blank check, right? Like for certain degrees.
Yeah, pretty much. Programs like the grad PLUS loans, they let students borrow up to the full cost of attendance, literally whatever the university decided to charge.
Which is wild. But the OBBBA changes that.
It eliminates grad PLUS loans entirely. Just gone.
Wait, entirely gone?
Entirely. Starting after July 1st, 2026, graduate students face a strict annual borrowing cap. It's just $20,500.
Wow. Okay, so what about people going to medical school or law school?
Right, professional students.
Oh.
So your future doctors, lawyers, veterinarians, they cap out at $50,000 a year.
Okay.
The government is drawing a very hard line on how much federal money flows into these programs.
And parents are feeling the squeeze here too, right?
They absolutely are. Parents who borrow to send their kids to college, they now face a $20,000 yearly limit per student.
Per student. Okay.
Yeah. And furthermore, that parent borrowing maxes out at a hard $65,000 over a lifetime.
Oh, wow. So a lifetime cap of $65,000.
Exactly. You simply cannot borrow $100,000 in federal money anymore just because some private university demands that price tag.
I mean, looking back at the old system, it kind of felt like handing an 18-year-old an unlimited credit card inside a casino.
That's actually a great way to put it.
Right. You just swipe the card, the government covers the chips, and the university just keeps raising the stakes.
Because why wouldn't they? The money was guaranteed.
Right. So the big economic question here is, does capping these loans actually force expensive colleges to lower their tuition prices? Or does it just, price middle-class students out of an education entirely?
Well, economists are debating that exact mechanism right now. The underlying theory relies heavily on supply and demand.
Okay. Make it simple for us.
Sure. So if you severely limit the supply of federal dollars flowing into universities, those colleges lose their guaranteed revenue streams.
Right.
Theoretically, they have to compete on price now. They must drop their tuition rates to match what students can actually afford to borrow under these new caps.
But, I mean, the reality on the ground rarely moves that cleanly, right? Like, economic theory is great, but...
Right. And advocacy groups are pointing to specific fields to show this, like nursing.
Okay. What's happening with nursing?
Well, a master's degree in nursing can easily cost up to $100,000 a year right now.
A year? That's insane.
Yeah. And if the federal government only allows a student to borrow $50,000, that leaves a massive $50,000 gap.
So what happens then? Do the universities blink?
They might not. They might just keep the price high. And that forces students to hunt for, high-interest private loans from banks.
Oh, and those private loans do not offer the flexible repayment protections that federal loans do.
Not at all. That gap creates an immediate crisis for the student.
Right, because if the university refuses to lower its price, the student either abandons the degree entirely or they take on this private debt that carries significantly higher risk.
Exactly. The government is essentially calling the universities bluff, but the students are the ones caught in the middle of the standoff.
Yeah, that's a tough spot to be in. So let's talk about the protections the government does offer for the money you actually can borrow.
Okay, yeah.
Because the old repayment plans like Save-E and Pay-E, those are disappearing completely by 2028.
Completely gone. Those plans tied your monthly bill to your income, but they carried a lot of complex rules.
So what's replacing them?
The new law replaces all those old systems with one single program. It's called the Repayment Assistance Plan, or RAP.
RAP. Okay. How does RAP work?
The structure operates on a very straightforward sliding scale. Borrowers pay between 1% and 10% of their income.
Just 1 to 10%.
Right, so if you earn under $10,000 a year, your payment drops to a flat $10 a month.
Wow, just 10 bucks.
Yeah, just $10. But if you earn $100,000 or more, you hit the maximum cap, which is 10% of your income.
Got it. And, the RAP plan actually fixes a massive structural flaw from the old system.
Oh, you mean negative amortization?
Yes. The government completely kills negative amortization.
Thank goodness, because negative amortization destroyed the financial futures of millions of borrowers.
Explain how that worked for those who don't know.
Sure. Under the old system, your income-based payment might be set at, say, $50 a month.
Okay.
But your loan generates $100 in interest every single month.
Right, so you're short 50 bucks.
Exactly. You pay your $50, and the remaining $50 gets piled onto your total debt.
So your balance actually grows larger every single month.
Yes. Even though you follow the rules and make your payments perfectly.
It's like you run on a treadmill but slowly slide backward.
Precisely. It's incredibly demoralizing. But under RAP, if you make your assigned payment, the government completely wipes out any leftover interest for that month.
That is huge. So your balance will never grow as long as you make your monthly payment.
Never. But the RAP plan actually goes one step further, and the math here is pretty incredible.
What do they do?
The government actively pays down up to $50 of your principal balance every single month you make an on-time payment.
Wait, they pay the principal for you?
Yeah. Consider the math for a low-income earner. Say your income requires you to pay just $10 a month.
Okay.
The government covers all the interest you didn't pay. Then they apply $50 directly to your core loan balance.
So you pay $120 over the course of a year.
But your actual loan shrinks by $600.
Wow. That's fantastic.
It is. The government actively reduces your debt simply because you stay engaged with the system and make your assigned micropayments.
Okay, so the RAP plan gives people a very clear path to shrink their debt and stay in good standing. But what happens to the millions of people who have already fallen off the path entirely?
That's where things get much more aggressive.
Right, because the OBBBA fundamentally changes who collects the money when things go wrong. The Department of Education basically shrinks its role, and the U.S. Treasury takes over.
Yeah, the Treasury assumes control of loan management, starting immediately with the 9.2 million borrowers who currently sit in default.
9.2 million people.
Yes. And moving these loans from the Department of Education to the Treasury, it represents a massive escalation in enforcement.
Break down the difference in collection power for us, because, when the Department of Education holds your defaulted loan, they generally just send letters, right? Make phone calls, rely on standard collection agencies.
Yeah, pretty standard stuff.
But what happens when the Treasury targets you?
Well, the U.S. Treasury possesses the most extensive collection powers of any institution on the planet.
That sounds terrifying.
It is. They do not need to call you and ask for money. The Treasury simply garnishes your wages before your paycheck even hits your bank account.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. They seize your federal tax refunds before you ever see the cash. They can even withhold up to 15% of your Social Security benefits.
So they just bypass you entirely.
Exactly. When the Treasury takes over a debt, they extract the money automatically from almost any federal payment you receive.
And 9.2 million Americans in default are about to face that reality.
Very soon, yes.
But, even if you avoid default and you stay on the RAP plan and you reach the finish line of your 20 or 25-year repayment term, the government eventually
Imagine finding out your
forgives
electric
whatever
bill
balance remains.
is secretly
They do.
funding the
But
government's
this new
massive
law
spending addiction.
resurrects a
It
brutal
is
financial
a
trap
pretty
at that
shocking
finish line.
realization when you actually look
We need
at
to
the
talk
math.
about the tax
Right.
bomb.
Ugh,
Well,
the
imagine
tax
for a second
bomb.
that you have a
This
savings
fundamentally
account.
alters the value of loan
And,
forgiveness.
Because previously,
you swore to your
under
family
the American
and over
Rescue
heart
Plan, the government
that
treated
this
money
money was
loan
strictly
forgiveness
for
as
fixing a
completely
leaking roof.
tax-free.
Right. You
You
reach the end of
said,
your term, the
if we
debt
don't
vanished,
fix this roof,
and you just moved on with your
the
life.
house is going to
Simple.
collapse.
It's an existential
However,
crisis
that
for the
specific
house.
rule
Exactly. It's the
expired.
Save the House
Now,
Fund.
the
That
IRS
your
reverts
car
back
breaks
to
down,
older
you
rules.
spend a little too
Which
much on
means they
groceries,
treat
you've got
forgiven
bills
student
piling
loan
up.
debt as
So what do you
taxable
do?
income.
You raise the
Exactly.
refund. Every penny
You take that
forgiven
money,
is treated
pay off
like
your credit
income you
cards, and
earned
tell
that
your
year.
family, hey, don't worry.
So let's
fix
look
the
at the
roof later.
actual numbers to understand
And
the
in
impact.
this scenario,
because it's
the
rough.
roof is the planet,
Advocacy
or at least
groups
Maryland's
like,
climate goals.
Protect
And the
Borrowers,
car is a
they
massive,
recently published
self-inflicted
data on this change.
$1.5 billion
Well, according to their research,
state
the average
budget
borrower
deficit.
receives
completely avoidable deficit,
$49,321
Welcome to the
in
deep
loan
dive.
forgiveness at the end of their
Today we're
repayment
exploring
term.
a classic
almost 50
case
grand.
of fiscal
And
sleight
because
of
the
hand
IRS now
coming out of
counts that
Annapolis. We are looking at the
$49,321 as
Strategic
sudden
Energy
income,
Investment Fund.
a married parent earning
SAIF.
$40,000 a year
It's a huge pot
faces
of money
a sudden
meant to save the environment,
$10,295
but it's turning into a hidden tax
and
on
lost
every
tax
single
credits.
person
Just boom,
paying an
a 10
electric
grand
bill
bill.
in
Yeah.
Maryland.
Explain the
It
mechanism
really is.
behind
It's
that
become the center of a
penalty
huge
because
political
it
fight.
involves how the
You've
IRS
got a
calculates
Democratic
poverty
governor,
relief.
frustrated
It does.
environmentalists
So if a married
making some
parent
very
makes
awkward
$40,000 a
compromises,
year,
and
the government
conservative
considers
critics
them
who
low
are
income.
rightly calling
So they
this whole thing
qualify
a
for
shell
things like
game.
a
the
shell
earned
game.
income tax credit
And when you
and
look
the
at the
child
documents
tax
we have
credit,
today,
which
reports,
often results in a
budget
large
proposals,
refund
critiques
check
from
that
Senate
these families,
Republicans,
frankly,
it is really
rely
hard to
on
unsee
for
it.
basic
Our mission for this
survival.
deep dive is
But the
simple.
year their loan
Follow
gets
the money.
forgiven, the
Always
math
follow
changes
the money.
violently.
We are going to see
Dramatically.
how a
The
fund
IRS
designed
looks
to
at their
fight
tax
climate
return
change
and sees
is
the
being used to plug holes
$40,000
in the
they
state
earned from
budget.
their job.
And we'll
Plus,
dig into the
the
argument that this isn't found money at all.
$49,321
This is
in
essentially a
forgiven
backdoor
debt.
tax
on
on
paper.
families.
On paper,
Let's get right
the
into
IRS
it.
believes
The
this family
Strategic Energy
suddenly
Investment
earned nearly
Fund. It sounds very
$90,000
official,
that year.
very important.
Wow.
What does
And
it
because
actually
their
do?
perceived
Well,
income basically
on paper,
doubled,
it is the
they
state's
instantly
green
trigger a
piggy
phase
bank.
out.
Meaning they
The
lose their
SIF is
benefits.
managed by the
Exactly.
Maryland
The
Energy
government
Administration.
disqualifies
Its
them
whole
from the
stated
earned
purpose
income tax
is to
credit and the
reduce
child
energy
tax
bills,
credit.
cut
They lose
waste,
the refund
and fund
they owe taxes on the
renewable
phantom
energy.
Like solar panels and
$49,000 they
efficiency
never
upgrades.
actually received
Exactly.
in cash.
But here
Now
is
let me
the
play
real
devil's
aha moment
advocate
of the
for a moment
story.
here.
Sure.
Because the
Where
standard
does the
tax
money
code applies this
actually
logic
come
everywhere
from?
else.
Because they aren't
if
just
you struggle to pay
taxing
your
you directly
mortgage
for it.
and a bank eventually
No, and
forgives
that's why politicians
$50,000 of
absolutely
your
love
home
it. It
loan,
feels free.
the IRS
So about
taxes that
40%
forgiven
comes from
mortgage debt
regional
as
carbon
income.
auctions.
Yes, they do.
That
But
is
the big
standard
chunk,
procedure.
the one growing like
So
crazy,
why is the
comes
argument
from something
being made
called
that
alternative
student loans
compliance
should
payments,
receive
or
like,
ACPs.
special
Which is just a
tax-free
fancy government
treatment?
term for a
It's
fine.
a fair question.
Right. It's
The
a fine
core
for failure.
difference
Let me
really
break it down.
lies
In
Maryland law
liquid
forces
assets.
utility
Okay,
companies to
explain that.
buy
When a
certain
bank
amount
forgives
of green
a portion
energy,
of a mortgrage,
they have to prove they're
the
using
borrower
renewables.
still owns a house.
But if they can't
They
find that
possess
green
a
energy,
physical,
or if it's just way too
valuable
expensive
asset
on the
that they
market,
can borrow
Which it
against.
usually is.
yeah,
Or
the
they
state
could
gives
even
them an
sell it to
escape
cover
hatch.
a sudden
The
tax
utility
bill.
can just
Right.
pay a fee
But
directly
student
to the
loans
state
represent
instead.
non-liquid
That fee
assets.
is
You
the
cannot
ACP.
sell your college
And
degree
here's
to
the
pay the
kicker.
IRS.
Utilities
okay.
are
And the
increasingly
borrowers reaching
just
this
paying the
20-year
fine
forgiveness
because
mark
it's cheaper than
generally
actually
lack the
buying
resources
green
to
energy.
absorb the
Wait,
hit.
so
Exactly.
the climate
The data
fund is
clearly
getting
shows that
incredibly
borrowers who
rich
spend 2 decades on
precisely
income-driven repayment
because
plans
the
largely
green
come
energy
from
mandates
low-income
are failing.
backgrounds.
Right.
Precisely.
The vast majority
it is
of
a
them hold less than
completely perverse
$1,000 in
incentive.
emergency savings.
The government
Oh,
made
wow.
the mandates
Less than
so
$1,000.
aggressive,
Yeah.
and the market
So
is
while
so
treating
distorted
forgiven debt
that
as
power
income
companies
aligns
are just
perfectly
writing
with
checks to the
standard
state
tax
instead of
code
going
logic.
green.
And
The
the stats
practical
on this are
reality
just
hands a
staggering.
$10,000
They are.
tax bill to a
In
family with
2022,
zero cash in
this
the bank.
revenue was
It creates a
$77
massive
million.
immediate
By
financial shock
2025, it
exactly
jumped
at the
to
moment they supposedly achieve
$365
freedom from their
million.
debt.
Right.
Wow.
It completely
From
undermines the
77 million
relief.
to
So the math
365
shifts,
million
the
in
taxes
3
hit
years.
hard,
Right, so now
and
the
the
state
Treasury
has this
flexes its muscles.
Massive
But
accidental
we have
pot
to
of
examine the
gold.
final
It's
piece of this
supposedly for green
legislation.
projects.
The PSLF
But remember,
rules.
that money
Yes.
didn't just fall out
The
of the
new
sky.
law
The utility
attaches
companies
very
paid those
specific
fines.
cultural and legal
And do you
strings
think
to the
those
Public
massive
Service Loan
corporations
Forgiveness
just eat
Program,
that cost out of the
or
goodness of their hearts?
PSLF.
Oh,
And this is
absolutely
where
not.
things
They
get
pass
really
every single
controversial.
penny of that
So
onto the
the
customer.
PSLF
Exactly. It
program
shows up
traditionally
right on your
wiped out
electric bill.
student
So
debt for
you,
people who
the
worked 10
everyday
years in public
ratepayer,
service.
are
Right.
paying for the
Teachers,
utility's
firefighters,
failure to meet a
nonprofit
government
workers.
mandate.
But starting in
The state
July
collects your money,
2026, the
drops it
Department
in
of
the safe
Education
and
will
says,
deny
look at all this
PSLF
cash we have
benefits
for the climate.
entirely to
Which brings
employees
us to
of
the
any
rate.
organization that has
Because
a,
that
quote,
money is definitely not
substantial illegal
staying in the
purpose.
climate fund. And the
Not anymore.
legislation
Enter Governor
lists
Wes Moore.
very specific triggers
His administration
that
is
disqualify
staring
an
down a
organization.
projected
Like a
$1.5
nonprofit or
billion
public employer
budget
loses
deficit.
eligibility if they aid illegal
billion.
immigration or if they
You can't just
support
ignore
terrorism.
a hole that
The
deep.
law
You can't.
also targets
And
organizations
when government
that engage in
overspends to
child
that
trafficking
degree, they start
across state
checking under the
lines
couch
for
cushions
the purpose
loose
of
change.
emancipation from their parents.
Except here,
And the
couch
new rule
cushion is the
focuses
clean
heavily
energy
on
fund,
specific
and the
medical
loose
procedures,
change
too.
is hundreds
Right,
of
tell
millions
us
of
about that.
taxpayer
An
dollars.
organization
So what's the
faces
actual proposal? How much are they
disqualification
taking?
if
The
it
governor's
performs chemical
plan
or surgical
diverts
castration
$292
or mutilation
million
on minors
directly
under the
from
age
the
of
SIF
19
into
in
the
violation
state's
of
general
federal or
fund.
state
Just to
law.
balance the
Okay,
books.
and there's more.
Just to cover their
Yeah.
overspending.
Finally, the rule
They
targets
are
employers
using
with a energy
documented
fines
pattern
to
of
pay
violating
for
discrimination
general
laws,
government
or a
operations,
pattern of violating state laws
bureaucracy,
regarding
salaries,
trespassing,
office
public
supplies, you
nuisance,
name
or
it.
blocking
But that's not even
highways.
all of
It
it. basically
Yeah.
I read in the sources there's also a rebate scheme, but applied to
Yes,
taxpayer dollars.
this is the part
That's exactly
critics
how
are
it
calling a
functions.
political
Now,
sweetener.
obviously,
They're
advocacy
grabbing
groups are
another
expressing deep
$100
concern over
million
this change.
out of the
They
fund
argue
to
this
give a
framework gives
one-time
politicians the
$40
ability to
rebate
just
to eligible
crush
households.
charities or medical
$40.
facilities they
Earbucks.
politically
So let me
disagree
get this
with.
straight.
Which is a huge
The state
concern for them,
mandates
yes.
drive
Right.
up energy
So how does
costs.
the government draw the
The
legal
utility
line
companies
between
pass those
unlawful
massive
activity
costs to you and
and
me.
a group simply
Our bills go
exercising,
up by
like,
hundreds of
protected
dollars a
First
year.
Amendment free speech?
And then
Well,
the governor
the
takes
Federal
a chunk of
Register
our own
explicitly
money,
addresses
hands
that
us back
exact
a
concern.
crisp
The
$40
government
bill,
insists it does
and
not
basically
regulate
says,
viewpoints,
"You're welcome."
opinions,
That is
or
the
political
exact
speech.
math.
It's
Yeah.
wild.
Okay, so
And if
how
you
do
look
they
at the
enforce
recent
it?
supplemental
To draw the
budget,
line,
they're
they
cutting
use a
or
strict
shifting another
legal
$80
standard
million.
called
When you add all
preponderance
this
of the
up,
evidence.
this raid
Preponderance
depletes
of
the
the
fund by
evidence.
82%.
The Department of
82%
Education
of the
relies
fund wiped out.
entirely on
Wiped out.
formal,
Yeah.
leaving
legal
only about
violations,
$164
official
million
court
for the
judgments,
actual
or
green
guilty
initiatives it
pleas.
was legally
Oh, I
meant
see.
for.
Right.
That
They
is
do
not
not
a trend.
disqualify an
That's a
organization
total
based
gutting.
on controversial
And this is
tweets
where
or
the
political
politics gets
stances.
super interesting.
They look for
Because you would
documented
assume the
illegal
environmentalist
actions.
groups like
But I
the
mean,
Sierra Club or
organizations
the
employ
Chesapeake
hundreds,
Climate
sometimes
Action
thousands of
Network,
people.
Sure.
you'd assume
Does a
they'd be
single
furious.
rogue employee
They were
doing something
initially
illegal
when this first
automatically
leaked. They called it
disqualify a massive
unacceptable.
hospital
They said it
network
was a
from the
huge
entire
mistake to
PSLF
use this
program?
money
No,
as a petty
the legislation
cash
built
drawer.
in protections
But
against
then
the
they
rogue
folded.
employee
They completely
scenario.
folded.
Okay, good. How
Now
does that
they
work?
are
The
actually
illegal activity
supporting
must
parts
represent
of the
a
governor's
central
mission
spending
or
plan.
a substantial
Talk about
purpose of the
strange
organization.
bedfellows.
So it has to
Why
be
on earth
systemic.
would they do that?
Exactly.
If they
The
truly
government
believe
weighs
climate
the scope
change is
of
an
the
existential
activity,
crisis,
the frequency of the
why let the state
violations,
raid the
and the
survival
organizational intent
It's just
behind
raw
the
political
conduct.
calculation.
Could you give
They
us an
know
example
voters
of
are
how
getting
that
crushed
plays
by
out in
inflation and
reality?
high energy
Sure.
bills right now.
Consider
if these
a legal
green
aid
groups
clinic
attack a
working with
$40
immigrants.
rebate,
Right.
If
even
the
if it's a
clinic
total
lawfully
gimmick,
advises immigrants
they look like
on
they
their
don't care
rights
about working
and
families.
helps them
So
navigate
they have
the
to
court
play the game.
system,
They are
they
swallowing
remain
a
fully
very bitter
protected
pill.
and eligible
In
for
exchange
loan
for letting the
forgiveness.
governor
Because
raid
they're
the
just doing
fund
legal
today,
work.
Right.
they are
However,
lobbying for a
if
new law
the
to
leadership
create
of
a
that
funding
same
floor in the
organization
future.
Meaning what
actively
exactly?
engages in
Meaning
smuggling
they want to
individuals across the
guarantee
border
that the
in
state will
violation of federal
mandate
immigration law,
roughly
the organization
$365
loses its
million a
eligibility.
year on climate
makes sense.
spending moving
The Department of
forward.
So
Education
they are
argues
throwing
this rule
today's
simply
taxpayers
protects
under the
taxpayer
bus
dollars from
to lock in a
subsidizing
permanent
illegal
claim on your
acts.
wallet later.
But critics
That's the
maintain that
gamble,
broad
and
definitions
it brings
could
us
still
right
be
to the
weaponized,
core
right?
conservative
Depending on
critique.
which political party
People
holds
like Senate
power and
Minority
directs
Leader
the
Steve Hershey
investigations.
aren't
Exactly.
buying
That's the
this
tension right
spin
now.
at all.
Wow.
Not for a second.
Well,
Let's
we have
walk through
covered
their
a massive
argument because
amount
it
of
really
ground today.
exposes
We really
the
have.
math here. Let's quickly
They call it the
recap the
hidden
reality
tax.
of the
Right.
OBBBA.
Let's be
You
rigorous about
face
this
strict
logic.
new borrowing
Step
caps.
one, the
That's
state forces a green
$20,500
mandate
for
that
grad
is
students,
totally
$50,000
disconnected
for
from economic
professionals,
reality.
and a
Step two,
$65,000
the utilities
lifetime
can't
cap
meet
for
it,
parents.
so they pay
Right.
the massive fine.
The new
Step
RAP
three,
plan caps your
utilities
monthly
raise your
payments
electric rates
and
to
actually
cover the
pays down
fine.
your
And
principal.
step four,
but it
the
leaves
state
an
grabs
average
that fine money to
$49,000
pay for
tax
general
bond
government
waiting for you at
bloat.
the end of the
Exactly.
line.
Don't forget
So,
the
in effect,
Treasury.
the
Right.
state is
The U.S. Treasury
taxing
now hunts down
electricity users
defaulted
to pay
loans.
for the DMV
And of course,
or state
public
salaries
servants face
without
strict new
ever having
legal
to
boundaries
publicly vote
regarding
on
the
a tax
organizations they
Hershey
choose
says
to work
Maryland
for.
families are
The
being
structural
double-billed.
foundation
You
of
pay your
higher
regular
education
income taxes,
finance just
and then you pay
fundamentally
this
changed.
massive
I mean, with
surcharge
the
on your
Treasury
electric
taking
bill.
over collections,
It's
the loan amount
incredibly
strictly
sneaky.
capped,
It's politically
and heavy
convenient.
taxes
Yeah.
applied to
And
forgiveness.
there's a second
The
layer
era
to
of
this
the unlimited
criticism.
blank
The
check
sheer
is officially
hypocrisy of
over.
it
It
all.
really
This
is.
is the
But the most
most
urgent question
glaring
going
part.
forward is how the
Politicians constantly
universities
tell us
respond.
climate
Will
change is an
colleges finally
existential
drop their
threat.
tuition
They say
rates
the
to
world is
match the new
burning.
reality of what students can
Code
actually
red
borrow?
for humanity.
Or
Right.
are we about to
We have
witness a
zero
massive
time to
historic
waste.
drop
So
in
critics are
college
asking a very
enrollment
simple,
across the
very
country?
devastating
That
question.
is the
If
multi-billion
this is
dollar
the most
question.
urgent crisis
And
in human
honestly,
history,
the answer is going to
why is
reshape the
climate
economy
fund
for a
the
generation.
very first thing you
Absolutely.
raid?
Well, thanks for
when
joining
you
us on this
overspend your
deep
budget?
dive into
You
the
don't raid your
OBBBA.
life-saving
Your student
surgery
loans
fund to pay
really
off your
do
credit
look
card.
completely
Exactly.
different now.
The critics
See you next
argue
time.
this